The iron smelled like old blood and desperation. I pressed my spine against the stone wall, feeling the cold seep through the thin fabric of my dress. The same dress I'd worn to what I thought would be my sister's trial. My sister. The words tasted bitter now, metallic, like I'd bitten my tongue and swallowed the pain. Around me, the prison breathed with sounds that shouldn't exist in the world I'd known. Low growls that vibrated through the floor, the scrape of claws against metal. Whispers in languages that seemed more animal than human. I didn't belong here. But then again, I'd never truly belonged anywhere. The council had been swift, efficient, clinical in their judgment. I could still see Evangeline's face, my older sister, beautiful and composed. As she'd pointed at me across that marble courtroom, her fingers steady, her voice clear as cathedral bells. She was the one who broke the treaty. She let the rogues through the northern border. I tried to stop her, but she wouldn't listen. Lies wrapped in silk. The werewolf delegates had believed her instantly. Why wouldn't they? Evangeline had always been the golden daughter, the one father paraded at diplomatic functions, the one whose hair fell in perfect dark waves while mine, pale as winter wheat, marked me as different, wrong, too much like our mother who died bringing me into the world. A woman father never spoke of except in tones of regret. You understand, the head councilman had said, not looking at me as the guards approached. That crimes against the treaty carry severe consequences. The werewolf territories demand justice. I'd tried to speak, to explain that I'd been nowhere near the northern border, that I'd spent that entire week cataloging ancient texts in the library basement, my only companions the dust and the silence. But my voice had sounded small in that vast room, and Evangeline's tears, perfectly timed, perfectly placed, had drowned out my protests. Now I was here, in Thornhaven, the prison they sent humans who committed crimes against the supernatural world, a place where werewolves ruled and human flesh was fragile as paper. A howl echoed through the corridor outside my cell, and I flinched despite myself. The sound wasn't like anything I'd heard in nature documentaries or read about in Father's collection of supernatural histories. This was deeper, laced with intelligence, and something that might have been words if I could just understand the language written in its fury. Fresh meat doesn't usually last the first night. The voice came from the cell beside mine. I couldn't see the speaker through the solid stone wall, but the voice itself was female, rough as gravel, tinged with dark amusement. I'm not meat, I whispered, hating how my voice shook. A laugh, sharp and short. Tell that to the males on the lower levels. They can smell your fear from here. Sweet and bright, like candy to them. You're human, which makes you either incredibly stupid or incredibly unlucky to be in Thornhaven. Unlucky, I managed, wrapping my arms around myself. The cell was maybe 8 feet square, containing nothing but a thin mattress on a stone platform and a bucket in the corner that I refused to think about. A single barred window high on the wall let in moonlight and the scent of pine forests and something wilder, muskier. What did you do? The voice asked. Kill someone important? Steal from a pack? Sleep with the wrong alpha's mate? Nothing, I said. I did nothing. Silence. Then, yeah, that's what everyone says. But they don't send humans here for parking tickets, sweetheart. Thornhaven is where they put the ones who've really crossed lines. The ones who made the wolves angry enough to want revenge, served slow. I closed my eyes, fighting the burning sensation behind them. I wouldn't cry, wouldn't give this place that satisfaction. But the truth sat heavy in my chest. Evangeline had done this deliberately. She'd committed whatever crime had angered the werewolves, probably while meeting with her secret lover. The one Father didn't know about, the one she'd been sneaking off to see for months. And when the consequences came calling, she'd simply pointed at me, the dispensable sister, the one nobody would miss. Father had stood silent during the trial. Silent. He'd watched them drag me away, and his face had shown nothing. Not sorrow, not anger, not even surprise. As if he'd always known I'd end up being useful for something eventually, even if that something was taking the fall for my sister's mistakes. Name's Rena, the voice said. I've been here 4 months, survived longer than most humans do. Want some advice? Yes, I breathed, grateful for any anchor in this nightmare. Don't make eye contact with the guards. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't walk like prey. I know that sounds impossible, but try. And whatever you do, don't show weakness in the common areas. They can smell pain, fear, tears. It makes them curious, and curious wolves in a place like this are dangerous wolves. How do I not show fear when I'm terrified? Another laugh. This one almost gentle. You learn. Or you don't. And then you don't have to worry about it anymore. Before I could respond, the sound of boots on stone echoed through the corridor. Heavy, measured steps, the casual walk of someone who owned every inch of ground they touched. The other prisoners, I could hear them now, dozens of them in cells up and down the corridor, went absolutely silent. Even the growls stopped, the footsteps paused outside my cell. I couldn't see who stood there in the shadows beyond the bars, but I felt the weight of their attention like a physical thing, pressing against my skin, reading me in ways that had nothing to do with sight. The air itself seemed to thicken, charged with a power that made my pulse hammer in my throat. Stand up. The command was quiet, almost soft, but it bypassed my conscious mind and spoke directly to something more primitive. My legs moved before I'd decided to obey, lifting me from the floor where I'd been huddling. I swayed slightly, lightheaded from fear, and the fact that I hadn't eaten since yesterday's breakfast. The figure stepped closer to the bars, and moonlight caught the angles of a face that seemed carved from stone and shadow. Male. Tall enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes, golden eyes that glowed faintly in the darkness, reflecting light like an animal's. His hair was dark, longer on top, and his jaw was sharp enough to cut. He wore simple clothes, dark shirt, darker pants. But there was nothing simple about the presence he carried. The sense of compressed violence held in check by will alone. A human, he said, and his voice carried notes I couldn't quite parse. Surprise? Curiosity? Hunger? They sent a human to Thornhaven. I wanted to look away, remembered Rena's warning about eye contact, but found I couldn't move. Those golden eyes held me pinned like a butterfly to cork. What's your name? My mouth was dry as ash. Celeste. Celeste, he repeated, tasting the syllables. And what did you do, Celeste, to anger my kind enough to be sent here? Nothing, I whispered. I was framed. My sister. She committed the crime and blamed me. I wasn't even there when it happened. I expected him to laugh, to dismiss my words the way the council had. Everyone in prison claimed innocence, didn't they? But he simply studied me with those unsettling eyes, his head tilted slightly, as if listening to something beyond my words. Interesting, he finally said. Your heartbeat doesn't skip. Either you're an excellent liar or you're telling the truth. I'm telling the truth, I said, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a flicker of something that might have been hope. He reached up and touched one of the iron bars, his fingers long and elegant despite the calluses I could see even in the dim light. This prison was built for werewolves who've committed crimes against the pack laws. Traitors, rogues, those who've killed their own kind. It wasn't designed for humans. Your skin is too soft for these walls, your bones too fragile for these chains. I know, I whispered. You won't survive a week here. The hope flickered and died. I know that too. He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving my face. I felt stripped bare under that gaze, like he could see past my skin into all the fear and loneliness and desperate will to survive that I'd carried my whole life. What if I told you, he said slowly, that there was another way? My heart jumped. What way? That depends. How much do you want to live, Celeste? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implications I couldn't fully grasp. Behind me, through the stone wall, I heard Rena's sharp intake of breath. More than anything, I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Then I suggest you pray you're as innocent as you claim. Because tomorrow, at dawn, I'm taking you out of this cell, and what happens next will prove whether you deserve to survive, or whether your sister did us all a favor by putting you here. He turned to leave, his footsteps already fading into the corridor's gloom. Wait, I called out, my voice cracking. Who are you? He paused, looked back over his shoulder. In the moonlight, I saw the gleam of his eyes, the sharp edge of his canines when he spoke. Ronan Ashford, Alpha King of the Northern Territories. And as of this moment, Celeste, you belong to me. Then he was gone, leaving only silence and the rapid thunder of my pulse and Rena's whispered curse from the cell beside mine. Oh, sweetheart, she breathed. I don't know if you just got saved or if you're already dead. I sank back against the wall, my legs shaking too badly to hold me upright any longer. The Alpha King, the ruler of all the werewolf territories in the north. I'd heard stories about him, about his ruthlessness, his strength, the way he'd unified fractured packs through either diplomacy or force. They said he could smell lies, that he'd killed challengers with his bare hands, that he answered to no one. And tomorrow, at dawn, he was coming back for me. I pulled my knees to my chest, wrapped my arms around them, and tried to convince myself that Rena was wrong, that this was salvation, not damnation. But the cold of the stone beneath me, and the howls echoing through Thornhaven's corridors, made that impossible to believe. Somewhere above me, through that high window, the moon hung full and bright. I'd read once that werewolves were strongest during the full moon, that their beasts rose closest to the surface when the lunar pull was at its peak. I had until dawn to figure out what the Alpha King wanted with me, and to decide whether living under his control was better than dying in this cell. The truth was, I already knew the answer, because survival had always been my greatest skill. Not strength, not beauty, not the political grace Evangeline possessed, just the stubborn, desperate will to keep breathing no matter what the world threw at me. If Ronan Ashford thought he could break that, he was welcome to try. But something told me, as I finally let my eyes close and exhaustion dragged me toward uneasy sleep, that the Alpha King hadn't survived this long by making empty threats or easy promises, and that tomorrow, my real trial would begin. Dawn came too quickly, and not quickly enough. I'd spent the night in fragments, half sleeping, half waking, my mind caught between nightmares of Evangeline's smile and strange dreams, where golden eyes watched me from shadows that breathed. When the first gray light filtered through the high window, I was already awake, my body rigid against the stone wall, listening to the prison's morning sounds. The howls had stopped sometime before sunrise, replaced by more human noises. Coughing, the shuffle of feet, low conversations in that strange mixture of human speech and growling undertones that made my skin prickle. I heard guards moving through the corridors, metal scraping metal, doors opening and closing with heavy finality. "He's coming for you," Rena said from the adjacent cell. Her voice carried a note I couldn't quite identify, part warning, part something that might have been envy. "I can smell him. Alpha scent carries before they do, like a storm rolling in." I stood on shaking legs, smoothing down my dress, wrinkled now, stained with the prison's dust. My hair, which I'd worn in a simple braid for the trial, had come loose during the night. I didn't have a mirror, but I could imagine how I looked, pale, disheveled, every inch the terrified human girl. "Don't walk like prey," Rena had said. But how did you walk like anything else when that's exactly what you were? The footsteps, when they came, were different from last night. Multiple pairs now, heavy boots in synchronized rhythm. Military precision. Pack discipline. They stopped outside my cell, and I heard the mechanical click of locks disengaging, thick bolts sliding free. The door swung open. 3 wolves stood in the corridor, all male, all radiating that same compressed power I'd felt from Ronan. They wore dark uniforms marked with a silver insignia, a crowned wolf's head, the Alpha King's personal guard. Their eyes swept over me with varying degrees of interest and disdain. "Come," the one in front said. He was shorter than the others but broader, built like a stone wall, with scars marking the visible parts of his neck and jaw. "King's orders. You try to run, we break your legs. Understand?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. He grunted, apparently satisfied, and jerked his head toward the corridor. I stepped out of the cell on legs that felt disconnected from my body, hyper-aware of the 3 wolves behind me, their presence like heat against my back. As we walked, I caught glimpses of other prisoners through the bars. Werewolves, all of them, watching with eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. Some looked curious, others looked hungry. One snarled as we passed, lunging against his chains hard enough that I heard bones crack. "Move faster," the guard ordered, his hand settling on my shoulder and pushing with enough force that I stumbled. The prison was larger than I'd realized, a warren of corridors and stairways that seemed to burrow deep into the mountain itself. We climbed for what felt like forever, my breath coming shorter, my legs burning. The guards never slowed, never adjusted their pace for my human limitations. Finally, we emerged into a section that looked less like a dungeon and more like a fortress. Stone walls gave way to polished wood. Torches were replaced by actual lighting. The air smelled cleaner here, tinged with pine and wood smoke instead of desperation. The guards led me to a heavy wooden door, knocked twice, and pushed it open without waiting for a response. The room beyond was unexpected. An office, I realized, though unlike any I'd seen in Father's government buildings. One wall was entirely windows, overlooking a forest that stretched to the horizon, dense and dark and alive. A massive desk dominated the space, its surface covered with maps and documents. Bookshelves lined another wall, packed with volumes that looked ancient. And standing by the windows, his back to us, was Ronan Ashford. He didn't turn immediately, simply continued gazing out at his territory, his hands clasped behind his back, his posture relaxed, yet somehow coiled, waiting. In the morning light, I could see details I'd missed in the cell's shadows. The breadth of his shoulders, the way his dark hair curled slightly at his nape, the subtle shift of muscles beneath his shirt that suggested controlled strength. "Leave us," he said quietly. The guards hesitated. "My lord, she's human." "Regulations state." I said, "Leave us." His voice didn't rise, but something in it made the temperature drop. If I need protection from a human girl who weighs less than my arm, perhaps I should step down and let one of you take the throne. Silence. Then the sound of retreating boots and the door closing with a soft click. We were alone. Ronan turned to face me, and I fought the instinct to step back. His eyes were just as unsettling in daylight. That impossible gold, slightly luminous, reading me with an intensity that felt invasive. He leaned against the edge of his desk, arms crossed, studying me like I was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "You look terrible," he observed. A surprised laugh escaped me before I could stop it, sharp, borderline hysterical. "I spent the night in a cell designed to break werewolves. I'm human." "How did you expect me to look?" His lips twitched, almost a smile. "Fair point. Sit." He gestured to a chair near the desk. I sank into it gratefully, my legs finally giving up their attempt at holding me upright. "Tell me about your sister," he said, moving around the desk to settle in his own chair. "Everything. Start from the beginning." So I did. I told him about Evangeline, beautiful, charming, perfect Evangeline who'd learned early how to weaponize Father's grief. How she'd been groomed for politics and diplomacy while I'd been shuffled off to libraries and archives, useful only for my ability to research obscure treaties and translate dead languages. I told him about Father's coldness, about the way Evangeline had always looked at me with barely concealed contempt, as if my existence was a personal insult. I told him about the lover I'd discovered she was meeting, a werewolf from the Eastern Territories, I thought, though she'd been careful never to let me see his face. About the nights she'd returned smelling of pine forests and musk, her neck marked with what Father had mistaken for decorative scarves, and I told him about the trial, the speed of it, the absolute certainty in Evangeline's voice when she'd accused me of treason against the treaty. Ronan listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. When I finished, my voice hoarse from talking, he was quiet for a long moment. "The crime she accused you of," he finally said, "was allowing rogue wolves through the northern checkpoint. 3 humans died in the attack that followed. Children." My stomach turned. I know." He stood, moving back to the windows. "The rogues were caught eventually, executed, but before they died, one of them mentioned a woman, dark-haired, human, who'd taken payment to look the other way when they crossed the border. Evangeline," I whispered. "That was my assumption, but I needed to see you first, to confirm." He glanced back at me. "Do you know what I am, Celeste, beyond the title?" I shook my head. "I'm a truth seeker. My wolf can smell lies, taste them in the air like copper. It's a rare gift, even among alphas. It's also why I've survived as long as I have. Impossible to deceive, difficult to manipulate." He turned fully to face me. "Last night, when you told me you were innocent, every instinct I have said you were telling the truth, but instinct isn't proof. So I had my people investigate, made some calls, pulled some favors." He moved back to the desk, picked up a folder, and tossed it toward me. It landed in my lap, papers spilling out, photographs, documents, testimonies. "Your sister met with the rogue pack leader 6 times before the attack. She accepted payment. Enough gold to fund a comfortable life far from your father's house. She planned to run away with her lover, start fresh somewhere the treaty couldn't touch them, but she needed money, and the rogues needed access. He leaned forward, his hands braced on the desk. She sold them the weakness in your northern defenses, and when the consequences came, she sacrificed you without hesitation. I stared at the photographs, Evangeline's face, clear as day, meeting with wolves I didn't recognize, money changing hands, dates and times that matched perfectly with the nights she'd claimed to be at diplomatic functions. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Because I have a problem," Ronan said bluntly, "and you might be the solution." I looked up at him, confused. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. The first gesture of frustration I'd seen from him. The treaty between humans and werewolves is fragile, built on centuries of distrust, and barely contained hostility. Your sister's crime nearly shattered it. The Human Council demanded justice, and we gave them what they asked for. A human prisoner for a human crime. They think you're guilty. They think justice has been served, but I'm not guilty. No, you're not, which puts me in an impossible position. He circled the desk, settling on its edge directly in front of me, close enough that I could see the flecks of darker gold in his eyes, smell the scent that clung to him, winter forests and something wild. If I release you and reveal the truth, the council will have to admit they condemned an innocent woman. They'll lose face, probably lose their positions, and they'll fight like hell to prevent that, which means destabilizing the treaty further. So I stay in prison for a crime I didn't commit? The anger surprised me, hot and sharp in my chest. I lose my freedom, maybe my life, so some politicians can save face? No, his voice was firm. You stay with me. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implications. I don't understand. I need someone I can trust, he said simply. Someone who isn't Pac, isn't bound by wolf politics or ancient grudges. Someone who has no reason to lie to me because they have nothing to gain from deception. He tilted his head, studying me. You're innocent. You're smart. I can see it in the way you've survived this long despite everything working against you. And you're desperate enough to be useful. Useful, I repeated, the word tasting bitter. I'm not trying to insult you, Celeste. I'm trying to offer you a way out of that cell. A way to survive. He leaned closer, his voice dropping. Stay here, in the fortress. Work for me. Help me navigate the human politics that I've never fully understood. Be my advisor, my translator, my bridge to a world I can destroy but never truly access. And if I refuse, then you go back to Thornhaven, and you die there within days, maybe hours, because the wolves in that prison can smell innocence, and it drives them mad. They'll want to break it, to punish you for being what they've lost. His eyes held mine. I can't protect you in there, but I can protect you here. My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against my thighs, trying to steady myself. Why would you do this? I'm nobody. Just the dispensable daughter of a minor council member. Because I'm tired, he said. And for the first time I heard exhaustion in his voice, saw it in the tight lines around his eyes. Tired of politics, tired of games, tired of never knowing who's lying and who's too terrified to tell the truth. You don't fear me the way Pac members do. You don't worship me the way some humans do. You just want to survive. That makes you more honest than anyone else I've spoken to in years. I looked down at the papers in my lap. Evangeline's face staring up at me, beautiful and heartless. The sister who'd thrown me away like trash. If I stay, I said slowly, what happens to her? To Evangeline? Ronan's smile was sharp, cold. Justice happens. Once you're established here, safe, we'll slowly release the truth. Let the evidence speak for itself. Your sister will face the consequences she's been running from. Father won't protect her. Your father, Ronan said quietly, has already made his choice. He chose her over you. When the truth comes out, he'll have to choose again, his position and reputation, or the daughter who destroyed both. What do you think he'll pick? I closed my eyes. I already knew the answer. So? Ronan prompted. Do you want to live, Celeste? Really live, not just survive? I opened my eyes. Those golden eyes that could smell lies, that could see through every defense I'd ever built. and I made my choice. Yes, I said, I want to live. He smiled then, a real smile, sharp and satisfied. Good. Then welcome to the pack, little human. Try not to die in the first week. The first 3 days were a lesson in survival of a different kind. Ronan had assigned me quarters in the eastern wing of the fortress, a room that was larger than my entire apartment back home, with windows overlooking the forest, and furniture that actually looked comfortable. But comfort didn't mean safety. The moment I'd stepped into the communal areas, I'd felt the weight of dozens of eyes tracking my every movement. The pack didn't trust me, didn't want me here. Human pet, I heard one wolf mutter as I passed through the dining hall that first morning, trying to find the kitchens Ronan had mentioned. The king's playing with his food now. I kept my head down, my steps measured. Don't walk like prey. But it was hard when every instinct screamed that I was surrounded by predators who could tear me apart before I managed to scream. The fortress itself was beautiful in a harsh, wild way, stone and timber construction that seemed to grow out of the mountain, with halls that echoed and rooms that smelled of pine smoke and old magic. Wolves moved through it with casual grace, their conversations switching fluidly between human speech and growls that made my bones vibrate. I learned quickly to identify the hierarchy. The way wolves positioned themselves around Ronan, the trusted inner circle who sat closest at meals, who spoke without hesitation. The mid-rank wolves who watched and waited, assessing their chances for advancement, and the omegas, the ones at the bottom, who did the grunt work and absorbed everyone else's aggression. Interestingly, they were the only ones who didn't look at me with open hostility. You're the girl from the prison, one of them said on my second day. She was young, maybe 19, with auburn hair and nervous energy that reminded me of a rabbit. Her name was Iris, the one the king took out. Yes, I said simply, not sure how much I should reveal. That's really rare. He never interferes with Thornhaven prisoners. She glanced around, lowered her voice. Some of the older wolves are saying it's a sign, that he's going soft. Others think you're some kind of spy. I'm not a spy. I didn't think so. You smell too scared to be a spy. She said it matter-of-factly without cruelty. Spies learn to mask their fear. You wear yours like perfume. It should have been insulting, but somehow it wasn't. Just honest. Iris became my unlikely guide, showing me which corridors to avoid during shift changes when the warriors trained and testosterone ran high. Which pack members were merely suspicious versus actively dangerous. How to move through the fortress without attracting attention. Stay away from Derek, she warned, nodding toward a tall wolf with silver-streaked hair and cold blue eyes. He was watching us from across the courtyard, his expression calculating. He's the beta, second in command. He thinks humans are weak, that the king's wasting time with treaties when he should just let us rule by strength. Does he challenge Ronan? Iris laughed, sharp and short. Nobody challenges the king, not anymore. The last wolf who tried lost his throat before he'd finished his challenge howl. She sobered quickly. But Derek has influence. A lot of wolves listen to him. If he decides you're a threat. She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. I saw Ronan only in passing during those first days. He was constantly in motion. Meetings with pack leaders, border patrols, dispute resolutions. Once I glimpsed him in the training yard, sparring with 3 wolves at once, his movements so fluid and precise they looked choreographed. He'd pinned all 3 within minutes, his forearm across the last wolf's throat, his expression bored. Then his eyes had found mine across the yard, and something had shifted in his face. Recognition. Assessment. He'd released the wolf and straightened, his gaze holding mine for a heartbeat longer before someone called his name and pulled his attention away. That night, a guard appeared at my door with a message. The king wanted to see me in his study after dinner. I arrived exactly on time, my palms sweating, my heart racing. The study looked the same as before, maps and books and windows overlooking endless forest. Ronan sat behind his desk, reading something that made his jaw tighten, his fingers tapping an irritated rhythm. Sit, he said, without looking up. I sat, folding my hands in my lap to hide their trembling. He finished reading, set the document aside, and finally gave me his attention. In the lamplight, his features looked sharper, more wolfish. The beast closer to the surface. How are you settling in? I'm alive, I said. That's more than I expected. A faint smile. Low bar, but accurate. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. I've been getting reports. You've been careful. Quiet. Smart enough not to antagonize anyone. That's good, but it's not enough. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? I mean the pack is watching you, judging you. And right now, they see a frightened human who's here because I allow it, not because you've earned your place. He stood, moving to pour 2 glasses of something amber from a crystal decanter. He offered me one. If you want to survive here long term, you need to be more than what are they calling you? My pet? I flinched, took the glass because refusing felt dangerous. I don't know how to be anything else. I'm not strong like them. I can't fight. I can barely navigate the fortress without getting lost. No, he agreed, returning to his desk. You can't fight, but you're not useless, Celeste. You read people. I've watched you do it. You understand political currents, social hierarchies. You survived your father's house and your sister's schemes. That takes intelligence. Intelligence doesn't stop claws. No, but it prevents the claws from coming out in the first place. He sipped his drink, his eyes never leaving mine. Tomorrow I'm holding court. Pack disputes, territorial claims, grievances that need resolution. You're going to sit beside me and observe. Why? Because I want you to see how we function, how decisions are made, and because I want the pack to see you as something other than a prisoner I'm too soft to execute. He set down his glass. You're going to learn our ways, Celeste. And eventually, you're going to help me bridge the gap between human and wolf. But first, you need to understand us. What if I can't? The question came out smaller than I'd intended. What if I'm not smart enough, or useful enough, or then you die? His bluntness was like cold water. I'm not going to lie to you. This isn't a fairy tale where the monster falls in love with the girl and keeps her safe regardless of her value. You earn your place here, or you lose it. Those are the only options. I stared at him, trying to reconcile the male who'd offered me salvation with the one now laying out brutal truths. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone crueler, maybe, or kinder. You're complicated. I'm practical, he corrected. I didn't become Alpha King by being nice. I became Alpha King by being effective, by making the hard choices and living with the consequences. He leaned forward, his elbows on the desk. You remind me of something, Celeste. Something I've almost forgotten. What? What it's like to be powerless, to have your fate controlled by others who don't care if you live or die. His eyes held shadows I hadn't seen before, depths of old pain. I was born to power, but I wasn't born to this throne. I had to kill for it. Had to prove myself over and over until there was no one left who dared challenge me. And somewhere in that process, I forgot what it felt like to be vulnerable. The confession surprised me, made him seem more real, less like the mythical figure the pack treated him as. Why are you telling me this? Because I need you to understand something. He stood, moved around the desk until he was directly in front of me. Close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. I'm not saving you out of kindness. I'm saving you because you're useful. Because innocence has value in a world built on lies and violence. But that value only exists if you stay innocent, if you stay honest, even when lying would be easier. I'm not a good person just because I didn't commit my sister's crime, I said quietly. I'm angry. I want revenge. I want to watch her face when she realizes I survived, and she's the one facing consequences. His smile was sharp with approval. Good. Anger is honest. Revenge is human. I can work with that. He reached out, and for a heartbeat I thought he might touch my face. Instead, his hand hovered near my cheek, close enough that I felt the heat of his skin. But channel it into something useful. Learn, observe. Become valuable enough that even Derek and his followers have to acknowledge your place here. And if I can't, then at least you'll die knowing you tried. He stepped back, releasing me from the intensity of his proximity. Go. Rest. Tomorrow will be challenging, and I need you sharp. I stood on shaking legs, the untouched drink still in my hand. At the door, I paused. Ronan? He looked up from the document he'd already returned to reading. Thank you, I said, for the truth. Even if it's harsh. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. Or something softer. Don't thank me yet, Celeste. You haven't seen court. You haven't seen what happens when wolves turn on each other and I have to make judgments that satisfy no one. He looked back down. Save your gratitude for after you've survived your first full week. I left, my mind churning with everything he'd said. The fortress halls were quieter now, most of the pack settled in for the night. But I could still feel eyes watching from shadows, hear the whisper of footsteps that stopped when I looked. In my room, I stood by the window and looked out at the forest stretching endlessly under the moon. Somewhere out there, beyond these walls and these woods, Evangeline was living my life, sleeping in my bed, probably celebrating her successful escape from consequences. But not for long. Ronan had promised me justice, had promised the truth would come out. And something in those golden eyes told me he kept his promises, no matter how long it took. I just had to survive long enough to see it happen. The next morning arrived with gray light and the sound of rain against stone. I dressed carefully in clothes that had been provided. Simple but well made, in dark colors that helped me blend with the pack's aesthetic. My hair, I braided tightly, keeping it away from my face. Looking weak was dangerous, but so was looking like I was trying too hard. Iris found me in the corridor outside the Great Hall. You're really sitting beside the king for court? Apparently. She whistled low. That's bold. Derek's going to be furious. That's usually his place, right at the king's side. Then Derek should take it up with Ronan. Oh, I like you, Iris laughed. You've got spine after all. Hidden, but it's there. The Great Hall was already filling when we entered. Wolves of all ranks finding their places, organizing themselves by status and relationship. At the front, on a raised platform, sat 2 chairs. One massive, throne-like, clearly Ronan's. The other, smaller but no less fine, sat beside it. Empty. Waiting. My heart hammered as I made my way forward, feeling every eye track my movement. Derek stood near the throne, his arms crossed, his expression thunderous. When I approached, he didn't move. That seat isn't for humans, he said flatly. The king says otherwise. The king, Derek said, stepping into my path, is making a mistake. One I intend to correct. We stared at each other, human and wolf, neither willing to back down. The hall had gone silent, everyone watching to see what would happen. Then Ronan's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Is there a problem, Beta? Derek turned, straightened. No, my lord. Just clarifying the seating arrangements. The arrangements, Ronan said, moving past him to settle into his throne, are exactly as I've ordered them. Celeste sits beside me. You have a problem with that. We can discuss it outside, after court. Just you and me. The threat was implicit, but clear. Derek's jaw tightened, but he stepped aside. No problem, my lord. Good. Ronan gestured to the empty seat. Celeste. I sat, my spine straight, my hands folded in my lap, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Ronan leaned slightly toward me, his voice pitched from my ears alone. Breathe. You look like you're about to pass out. I might, I admitted. Don't. It would ruin the effect. His lips curved. Besides, I'd have to carry you out, and that would undermine the whole "you're capable and valuable" message I'm trying to send. Despite everything, I almost smiled. Then court began, and I stopped thinking about anything except survival. Court was nothing like the sterile proceedings I'd witnessed in Father's world. Here, everything was raw, visceral. Wolves didn't hide their emotions behind diplomatic masks. They snarled them, growled them, let their eyes flash gold with barely restrained violence. And Ronan sat at the center of it all like the eye of a storm, perfectly calm, while chaos swirled around him. The first case was territorial. 2 mid-rank wolves arguing over hunting grounds near the eastern border. They stood before the throne, their postures aggressive, their voices rising as each tried to shout over the other. I watched Ronan listen without interrupting, his expression unreadable, his fingers drumming a slow rhythm on the arm of his throne. When he'd heard enough, he simply raised one hand. Instant silence. Marcus, he said, addressing the larger of the 2 wolves. You claim the Eastern Territory by right of occupation, that you've hunted there for 3 years without challenge. Yes, my lord. And you, Finn, claim it by ancestral right, that your family controlled that territory before the unification. The younger wolf nodded, his jaw tight. Ronan was quiet for a moment, his eyes moving between them. Then he leaned back, utterly relaxed. Here's what's going to happen. You're both idiots for bringing this to me instead of working it out yourselves like adults. So you're going to share the territory. Marcus takes mornings, Finn takes evenings. You alternate on the full moon. If I hear about this dispute again, I'm giving the entire territory to someone else, and you both lose. Understood? The wolves exchanged glances, clearly unhappy, but not stupid enough to argue. Understood, my lord, they said in unison. Good, get out. They left, and I noticed several other wolves in the hall nodding approval. The judgment was harsh but fair, and it sent a message. Don't waste the king's time with petty disputes. The next case was darker. A female wolf had accused a male of assault. Not physical, but dominance abuse, using his rank to force submission beyond what was acceptable. The male denied it vehemently, his supporters vocal in their defense. But when the female spoke, describing what had happened in a voice that shook with suppressed rage, I saw Ronan's expression change. The casual authority vanished, replaced by something cold and lethal. Celeste, he said quietly, not looking at me. What do you observe? The question caught me off guard. Every eye in the hall turned toward me, waiting. My mouth went dry, but I forced myself to focus. To look at the two wolves as I'd been trained to look at father's political opponents, reading body language, listening for inconsistencies. He's lying, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. His heartbeat is elevated, but not from anger, from fear. And he keeps touching his neck, the submission point. Subconscious guilt behavior. Silence. Then Ronan nodded slowly. Elaborate. I looked at the female wolf, saw the rigid control in her posture, the way she held herself like shattered glass barely held together. She's telling the truth, and she's terrified that no one will believe her because he's higher rank. You can see all that? Derek's voice carried from somewhere behind the throne, skeptical and sharp. I can read people, I said, meeting his gaze when he moved into view. It's what I did for my father. Assessed diplomatic opponents, identified weaknesses. Bodies don't lie, even when mouths do. Ronan stood, and the temperature in the hall seemed to drop. He descended from the platform, moving toward the accused male with predator grace. Strip your shirt. My lord. Now. The male complied, his hands shaking. When his shirt came off, I saw them. Fresh marks on his shoulders, defensive wounds, the kind someone gets when they're fighting off an attacker. She fought back, Ronan said quietly, almost gently. Marked you, and you've been hiding it, hoping no one would notice. He circled the male like a shark. The punishment for dominance abuse is exile. But you didn't just abuse your rank. You lied about it. Called her a liar in front of the pack. That's worse. Please. The female chooses, Ronan interrupted, looking at the accuser. Exile or trial by combat. You're right as the injured party. The female wolf straightened, her eyes burning. Combat. The male went pale. Tomorrow at dawn, Ronan said. Shifted form. To submission or death, her choice. He returned to the throne, his expression carved from ice. And if anyone else in this pack thinks rank gives them the right to abuse those below them, pay attention. Because I will always side with the victim, always. The hall erupted in whispers. I saw respect on some faces, approval on others. But on Derek's face, I saw something else. Calculation. Like he was reassessing some internal equation. Court continued for hours, disputes over mates, over resources, over ancient grievances that should have died generations ago. Ronan judged each case with the same brutal efficiency, sometimes asking my opinion, sometimes ignoring me entirely. But my presence beside him sent a message that rippled through the pack. The human wasn't just a curiosity. She had value. Had the king's ear. It made me a target, but it also made me real. When court finally ended, I was exhausted, my mind spinning with everything I'd witnessed. Ronan dismissed the pack, and slowly the hall emptied, but Derek remained, his arms crossed, his expression dark. A word, my lord? Ronan sighed. Make it quick. Derek's eyes flicked to me. Private? She stays. A muscle jumped in Derek's jaw, but he nodded. Fine. I'll be blunt. The pack is questioning your judgment. Bringing a human into our inner circle, asking her opinion on pack matters, seating her beside you like a mate. She's not... I started, but Ronan's hand moved slightly, silencing me. Like a mate, Ronan repeated, his voice dangerous. Interesting choice of words, Beta. Almost like you're suggesting something. I'm suggesting that appearances matter. That the pack needs to see strength, not... Derek gestured at me, frustrated. Not this. She's a liability. A human who can't defend herself, who knows nothing about our ways, who identified a liar when everyone else was ready to believe him, Ronan interrupted, who read a situation in seconds that might have taken us days of investigation, who has survived more rejection and betrayal than most of my warriors have faced in battle. He stood, and suddenly Derek looked smaller despite his size. You think she's weak because she's human? I think she's stronger than half the wolves in this fortress because she's still standing despite having every reason to break. My lord, I'm not finished. Ronan descended from the platform, moving into Derek's space. You've been Beta for 7 years. You're good at it. Strong, smart, loyal, but you have a blind spot, and it's going to cost you if you don't fix it. You think power only comes from claws and teeth, that anything gentle is weakness. But I've seen empires fall because leaders forgot how to be anything except brutal. The pack respects brutality, the pack respects strength, and strength comes in many forms. Ronan glanced back at me. She's staying, Derek. Get used to it. Help her learn, or at minimum don't actively sabotage her. Because if she fails, it reflects on my judgment. And if my judgment is questioned, we have bigger problems than one human in the fortress. Clear? Derek's expression was stone. Crystal, my lord. Good. Dismissed. Derek left, his footsteps heavy with suppressed anger. When we were alone, I finally let myself breathe. You just made an enemy of your second in command, I said quietly. I already had one. I just confirmed it. Ronan returned to his throne, suddenly looking tired. Derek's been pushing boundaries for months, testing to see how far he can go before I push back. This was inevitable. Because of me. You're the excuse, not the cause. He rubbed his face. The truth is, Derek wants this throne. Has wanted it since I killed the previous king and took power, but he's smart enough to know he can't challenge me directly and win, so he undermines, plants doubts, waits for me to show weakness, and bringing me here looks like weakness. To him, yes. To others. Ronan smiled faintly. To others, it looks like confidence. Like I'm secure enough in my power that I don't need to perform strength every second. That I can afford to be curious about other ways of seeing the world. I moved closer, studying his face. In the empty hall, without the pack watching, he looked different. Still dangerous, still powerful, but more human somehow. Or maybe just more tired. Why did you really bring me here? I asked. The truth this time. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. Because I'm lonely, Celeste. Because I'm surrounded by wolves who see me as king first, and person never, who agree with everything I say, fear everything I am, and would tear each other apart for a scrap of my approval. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something raw in his eyes. But you? You're not pack. You don't want my throne or my favor. You just want to survive. That makes you the most honest person in this entire fortress. I'm not that honest, I admitted. I want revenge on my sister. I want my father to regret choosing her over me. Those aren't noble motivations. No, he agreed, but they're real. And real is what I need. He stood, offering me his hand. Come on. I'll walk you back to your quarters. It's not safe for you to wander alone after court. Too many emotions running high. I took his hand, surprised by the warmth of his skin, the careful way he steadied me when I stumbled slightly on the platform steps. We walked through the fortress in companionable silence, and I found myself noticing small things. The way wolves moved out of our path, the respect in their eyes when they looked at him, the curiosity when they looked at me. At my door, Ronan paused. You did well today. Better than I expected. I was terrified the entire time. I know. I could smell it, but you functioned through the fear, and that's what matters. He hesitated, then added, the female you helped today, her name is Sarah. She'll remember what you did. Others will too. You're building allies, whether you realize it or not, or enemies. Those too. But in my experience, the people worth knowing are usually the ones who make enemies by doing the right thing. He left before I could respond, his footsteps fading down the corridor. I entered my room, closed the door, and finally let myself collapse against it. 1 week. I had survived 1 week in a werewolf fortress, sat beside an alpha king in court, and helped deliver justice to someone who needed it. It felt impossible, like I'd stepped into someone else's life, someone braver and stronger than the girl who'd cowered in that cell in Thornhaven. But maybe that was the point. Maybe survival changed you, made you into someone new. I moved to the window, looked out at the forest painted silver by moonlight. Somewhere out there were wolves hunting, running, living their wild lives, and somewhere beyond those trees, beyond the territories Ronan controlled, was Evangeline. Still free, still unpunished, but not forever. I pressed my palm against the glass, made a silent promise to that distant sister who'd thrown me away. I would survive this, would learn everything Ronan could teach me, would become valuable enough that even Derek and his allies couldn't dismiss me. And when the time came, when the truth about her crimes finally surfaced, I would be there to watch her fall. Not from weakness, not from fear, from strength I'd earned by refusing to break. The moon climbed higher, and in the distance a wolf howled. Long and lonely and wild, I closed my eyes and listened, letting the sound wash over me. This was my life now, my world. And despite everything, despite the danger and the fear and the uncertainty, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt alive. 3 months changed everything. Winter settled over the fortress like a held breath, transforming the forest into something from a fairy tale, all snow-heavy branches and frozen stillness. The pack adapted, their routines shifting with the seasons, hunts becoming longer and more strategic as prey grew scarce. And I adapted too. Ronan had been right about allies. Sarah, the female I'd helped in court, had sought me out the day after her victory in combat. She'd appeared at my door with bruised knuckles and a fierce smile, declaring that she owed me a life debt. I'd tried to refuse, told her I'd only spoken the truth, but she'd insisted. In wolf culture, apparently, debts were sacred. She became my guardian, my teacher, my unexpected friend. She taught me the pack's social codes, the subtle hierarchies I'd been blind to, how to read the shift in someone's posture that meant challenge versus submission, how to move through the fortress with purpose instead of fear, how to meet a wolf's eyes just long enough to show respect without triggering dominance instincts. "You're learning," she said one morning as we walked through the training yard. Snow crunched under our boots, and our breath misted in the cold air. 3 months ago, you flinched every time someone raised their voice. Now you barely react. I still flinch on the inside, I admitted. That's allowed. It's the outside that matters, she grinned, bumping my shoulder. The pack's starting to accept you, you know. Not everyone. Derek and his cronies still think you're a waste of space. But enough. They see how hard you work, how you don't ask for special treatment. It was true. I'd carved out a role for myself beyond sitting in court. I'd started helping with pack records, translating old treaties, mediating disputes between wolves who couldn't stand each other but trusted me to be neutral. Small things. Practical things. But they added up to something that felt like belonging. And Ronan. Ronan had become something I didn't have words for. We spent hours together, usually late at night when the fortress slept, and he could drop the king's mask. He'd ask about my childhood, about human customs that baffled him, about father's political maneuvering. I'd ask about wolf history, about what it meant to be alpha, about the loneliness of leading people who feared you. Sometimes we just sat in silence, comfortable in each other's presence, while he worked through paperwork and I read from his extensive library. Once, I'd fallen asleep in his study, exhausted from a long day. I'd woken to find a blanket draped over me and Ronan still at his desk, his eyes soft when they met mine in the lamplight. He hadn't said anything, just smiled slightly and returned to his work. It was the gentlest thing anyone had ever done for me. But gentleness was dangerous when Derek was watching, and he was always watching. The confrontation came during the winter solstice celebration, a pack tradition involving too much food, too much drink, and wolves in their most primal moods. The great hall had been transformed, fires blazing in massive hearths, tables groaning under the weight of roasted meat and fresh bread. Wolves laughed and fought and celebrated with the kind of wild joy that was both beautiful and terrifying to witness. I'd stayed on the edges, nursing a cup of spiced wine and watching the chaos with Sarah at my side. Ronan was at the center of it all, of course, His presence demanded even when he wasn't trying. Wolves kept approaching him, offering challenges or toasts or requests, and he handled each with the same easy authority. Then Derek stood, his voice cutting through the noise. "A toast," he announced, raising his cup. The hall quieted, everyone turning to face the beta, to our king, who has led us through another year of prosperity and strength. Wolves cheered, drinking deep. But something in Derek's tone made my skin prickle. "And to new traditions," Derek continued, his eyes finding me across the hall. "Like bringing humans into our most sacred spaces, like asking their opinions on pack matters they couldn't possibly understand. Like..." "Careful, Beta." Ronan's voice was soft, but it silenced the hall instantly. "That sounds dangerously close to a challenge." "Not a challenge, my lord. An observation." Derek smiled, but there was nothing friendly in it. "I'm simply wondering when we became so weak that we need human guidance. When our Alpha King became so uncertain of his own judgment that he relies on..." "Enough." Ronan stood, and the temperature seemed to drop. "You want to say something, Derek? Say it clearly. No more dancing around implications." Derek's smile widened. "Fine. I think you've been compromised. I think this human has clouded your judgment, made you soft. And I think it's time someone reminded you what it means to be wolf." The hall erupted in whispers. This was it. The challenge everyone had been waiting for. Dancing around for months. Sarah's hand found mine under the table, squeezing hard. Ronan laughed, the sound cold and sharp. "You think I've gone soft? You think one human girl has somehow neutered the wolf who killed his way to this throne?" He moved down from the platform, every step measured, predatory. "By all means, Beta. Remind me what it means to be wolf. Challenge me properly. Let's see if your theories about my weakness hold up when we're in the ring." Derek hesitated, just for a second, but everyone saw it. The flicker of uncertainty, the realization that he'd pushed too far, too fast. I'm not challenging for the throne, my lord. Just questioning..." "You're questioning my judgment, my authority, my right to rule as I see fit." Ronan stopped directly in front of Derek, close enough that they were almost touching. "In wolf culture, that is a challenge, so either follow through or back down. But don't stand there pretending you're doing anything other than undermining me in front of the entire pack." The silence stretched, thick with tension. I could see Derek's calculations playing out across his face, the knowledge that he couldn't win in direct combat, but also couldn't back down without losing face completely. Then I heard myself speaking, my voice cutting through the quiet. "He's afraid." Every eye turned to me. I stood on shaking legs, my heart hammering, but I kept my chin up, kept my voice steady. Derek isn't challenging because he's confident. He's challenging because he's afraid. Afraid that change is coming, that the old ways aren't enough anymore. Afraid that strength might mean something different than just claws and teeth. I moved forward, navigating between tables until I stood in the open space near Ronan and Derek. He's afraid that if I prove valuable, if I show that humans and wolves can work together, then everything he believes about superiority and dominance becomes questionable. "You know nothing about what I believe," Derek snarled. "I know you've been undermining me since the day I arrived. I know you've told pack members not to help me, not to teach me, to make my life as difficult as possible." I met his eyes, refusing to look away, even when my instincts screamed danger. "And I know it hasn't worked, because I'm still here, still learning, still earning my place despite everything you've done to prevent it." "Celeste?" Ronan's voice carried a warning, but I ignored it. "You want to challenge someone?" I said to Derek. "Challenge me. Not to combat. We both know I'd lose, but to usefulness, to value. Give me any task you think I can't accomplish, any problem you think requires wolf strength to solve. If I fail, I leave the fortress. If I succeed, you acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, there's more than one kind of strength worth respecting." The hall exploded in noise, shouts, arguments, wolves debating whether such a challenge was even possible. But Derek was staring at me with something like respect, mixed with his anger. "You're serious. Completely." He glanced at Ronan, who shrugged slightly. The king's expression was carefully neutral, but I caught the slight curve of his lips. Pride, maybe, or amusement at my audacity. "Fine," Derek said slowly. There's a rogue problem on the western border. Small pack, maybe 6 or 7 wolves, stealing livestock from human farms. We've sent warriors to drive them off, but they keep coming back. They're too clever to catch, too fast to corner. His smile was sharp. Go stop them. No pack warriors, no violence. Just you and your human cleverness. You have 1 week. My stomach dropped. This was suicide. But I'd opened my mouth, made the challenge, and now I had to follow through. Done, I said, hoping my voice didn't shake. 1 week. Ronan caught my arm as I turned to leave, his grip gentle but firm. My study. Now, I followed him through the fortress, acutely aware of the wolves watching, whispering. In his study, he closed the door and rounded on me. What the hell were you thinking? I was thinking Derek needed to be challenged. That he was using me to undermine you and someone had to. So you volunteered for a suicide mission? His eyes flashed gold, anger and fear mixing. Rogues are dangerous, Celeste. They're not bound by pack law, not controlled by alpha commands. They'll see a lone human and they'll... What? Kill me? I laughed, sharp and bitter. I've been waiting to die since the moment I arrived at Thornhaven. At least this way, I die doing something that matters, proving something, not just existing until someone decides I'm not useful anymore. He stared at me, breathing hard, his wolf clearly close to the surface. Then he moved, pulling me into an embrace so sudden and fierce that I gasped. His arms wrapped around me, one hand cradling the back of my head, and he buried his face in my hair. You matter, he said, his voice rough. Not because you're useful, because you're you. Because you're brave and stubborn and refuse to break no matter what the world does to you. Because in 3 months, you've become... He pulled back enough to look at me, his eyes searching mine. Important. To the pack. To me. My breath caught. Ronan, I'm coming with you. To the western border. I won't interfere, won't fight your battles, but I'm not letting you face rogues alone. Derek will say that's cheating, that I'm relying on your protection. I don't care what Derek says. His hand came up to cup my face, his thumb brushing my cheekbone with devastating gentleness. Let him challenge me properly if he's brave enough. But I'm not losing you because of pride or politics or his wounded ego. Something shifted between us in that moment. Some invisible line we'd been dancing around for months finally crossed. I could see it in his eyes, the way he looked at me not as king to subject, not as wolf to human, but as man to woman, with want and fear and something deeper that neither of us had words for. If we do this, I whispered, if we're whatever this is becoming, it makes everything more complicated. Everything's already complicated. He leaned his forehead against mine, his breath warm on my lips. But for the first time in years, I don't care. I don't care about politics or pack law or what anyone thinks. I just care about keeping you alive and keeping you here. I closed my eyes, letting myself have this moment, this feeling of being wanted, being valued for more than just utility. Okay, I breathed. Okay, you can come. But we do this my way. No violence unless absolutely necessary. I need to prove I can solve problems without claws. Your way? He agreed. I'll just be the very intimidating shadow that keeps you from being eaten. Despite everything, I smiled. That's all I ask. We left at dawn, just the two of us, heading west through forests that grew wilder and denser the farther we traveled from the fortress. Ronan moved with easy grace, his senses alert to everything around us. I struggled to keep up, my human limitations obvious, but he never complained. Just adjusted his pace when I needed breaks, shared his water, pointed out animal tracks with the patience of a teacher. On the second day, we found the rogue camp. They'd set up in a cave system near the border, close enough to human farms for easy raids, but hidden enough to avoid casual discovery. 6 wolves, like Derek had said, lean, scarred, dangerous looking, but when I observed them over several hours, I noticed something. They're starving, I told Ronan, as we crouched behind a ridge overlooking the camp. Look how they move. They're weak, desperate. They're not raiding for sport. They're raiding to survive. That doesn't make them less dangerous. No, but it means they're not enemies. Just desperate people making bad choices because they have no other options. Ronan looked at me, something like wonder in his eyes. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we offer them a different choice. I approached the camp alone, my hands raised, my heart trying to escape my chest. The rogues saw me immediately, 6 pairs of eyes fixing on me with predatory intensity. The largest, a male with a scarred muzzle, stood and growled, a sound that made my bones vibrate. "I'm not here to fight," I called out, my voice only slightly shaky. "I'm here to talk. To offer you something better than stealing livestock and living like criminals." "Who are you?" the scarred male demanded. "My name is Celeste. I work with Alpha King Ronan Ashford, and I'm here to offer you a choice. Keep raiding and eventually get killed by pack warriors, or come back with me and petition for pack membership. Food, shelter, purpose. A place to belong." They laughed. Harsh, bitter sounds. "The packs don't want rogues. We're outcasts. Criminals. Why would the Alpha King accept us? Because I'm asking him to." I moved closer. Slowly. Carefully. "Because you're not bad wolves, just desperate ones. And because the pack is stronger with you in it than constantly fighting against you. And if we refuse?" I swallowed hard. "Then Ronan Ashford, who's currently about 50 yards behind me, will give you one warning to leave these territories permanently. And if you refuse that..." I didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. The rogues exchanged glances. The scarred male studied me for a long moment, his head tilted. "You're human." "Yes." "And the Alpha King sent a human to negotiate with us?" "The Alpha King is letting me prove that not every problem requires violence to solve." I met his eyes, held them. "What's your name?" He seemed surprised by the question. "Garrett." "Garrett, I'm not going to pretend this is an easy choice. Joining a pack means following laws, accepting hierarchy, giving up the freedom you've had as rogues, but it also means not wondering where your next meal comes from. Not constantly looking over your shoulder. Not dying alone in these woods because you're too weak to hunt anymore." Silence. Then Garrett looked at his pack, his small, desperate family, and I saw the moment he broke. What would we have to do? 2 days later, we returned to the fortress, with 6 former rogues walking cautiously behind us. The pack's reaction was mixed. Some wolves were outraged that I'd offered membership to raiders. Others were curious, intrigued by the idea that mercy could be a form of strength. Derek looked like he'd swallowed something sour. "You were supposed to drive them off," he said flatly, as we stood in the great hall, the entire pack assembled to witness my return. "Not recruit them." "I was supposed to stop the raids," I corrected. "Which I did. These wolves have agreed to join the pack, to follow pack law, to contribute instead of steal. Problem solved without violence, without death. Isn't that better?" "That's not how we..." "Beta," Ronan interrupted, his voice carrying command. Celeste completed the challenge as specified. She stopped the raids. How she accomplished it is irrelevant. He looked at Garrett and his small group. "You've petitioned for pack membership. That means you answer to me, you follow pack law, and you earn your place through work and loyalty. Break those terms, and you're gone. Or worse. Accept them, and you're under my protection. Your choice." Garrett dropped to one knee, his pack following suit. "We accept, Alpha King." And just like that, it was done. I'd succeeded where Derek had been certain I'd fail. Had proven that human cleverness, empathy, and negotiation could solve problems that claws couldn't touch. The pack's attitude toward me shifted after that. Not everyone loved me. Some still saw me as an interloper, a human who didn't belong. But I'd earned a grudging respect. Even Derek stopped actively undermining me, though his eyes still held calculation when he looked at me. Winter deepened, and with it came news from the human territories. A messenger arrived on a frozen morning in late January, bearing sealed documents addressed to Ronan. I watched him read them in his study, saw his expression darken, his jaw tighten. "What is it?" I asked. He handed me the papers without a word. They were official council documents, testimonies from witnesses who'd seen Evangeline meeting with the rogue pack leader, financial records showing her payments, a formal investigation into the crime she'd committed, the crime she'd blamed on me. The truth was coming out, finally. "The council wants to negotiate," Ronan said quietly. "They're offering a trade. They'll formally acknowledge your innocence and punish Evangeline if we agree to strengthen the treaty terms. Give them more favorable trade agreements. Political leverage," I whispered, staring at my sister's name on the documents. "They're using this to extract concessions." "Yes." But the important part is that you'd be exonerated, publicly. Your father would have to acknowledge the truth. Evangeline would face consequences. He moved closer, his hand finding mine. You'd be free, Celeste. Free to go home if you wanted. Free to reclaim your life. I looked up at him, saw the carefully controlled emotion in his eyes. The fear that I'd choose to leave, the hope that I wouldn't. Home, I repeated, testing the word. Once it had meant father's house, my books, my quiet life. But that girl was gone, transformed by prison, by survival, by 3 months of learning what it meant to be strong. I don't want to go back, I said, and watched relief flood his features. That life, that place. It never felt like home. It felt like waiting. Like I was just existing until someone decided what to do with me. And here I'm living, actually living, making choices, solving problems, mattering to people who see me for who I am, not who they wish I'd be. I squeezed his hand. Negotiate your treaty. Let the truth about Evangeline come out. But tell the council that I'm staying here, by choice. Because this is where I belong now. Ronan pulled me close, his arms wrapping around me with fierce possession. You're sure? Because once the truth is out, you could have anything. Any life you wanted. You don't have to stay in a fortress full of werewolves just because— I'm not staying because I have to, I interrupted, pulling back to look at him. I'm staying because I want to, because I've found something here that I never had in the human world. Purpose, respect, belonging. Because I've found you. His eyes flashed gold, his wolf rising to the surface. Celeste. I love you, I said, the words simple and terrifying and true. I don't know when it happened or how, but I love you. Not because you saved me, not because you gave me shelter, but because you saw me when everyone else looked through me. Because you're lonely and strong and trying so hard to be good when the world keeps demanding you be brutal. Because you let me be brave when I thought I'd forgotten how. He kissed me then, fierce and gentle and desperate all at once. His hands cradled my face like I was something precious, and I tasted winter on his lips, tasted promise and hope, and the beginning of something that felt like forever. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. I love you too, he whispered. My fierce, stubborn, impossible human. My mate. The word sent electricity through me. Mate. In wolf culture, it meant something sacred, permanent, chosen. Is that allowed? I asked. Alpha King and human? I don't care if it's allowed, he said simply. I'm making it allowed. Making you my mate, my equal, my partner in everything. Let the pack adjust. Let the council negotiate. You're mine, and I'm yours. And that's the only truth that matters. The treaty was signed 3 weeks later. The council formally exonerated me, issued a public apology, and arrested Evangeline for her crimes. I learned later that father had tried to defend her, but the evidence was overwhelming. He'd lost his council position in the scandal, his reputation destroyed by his daughter's betrayal, and his own willingness to sacrifice an innocent child. I felt nothing when I heard. No satisfaction, no grief. Just distance. Like those people belonged to someone else's story. Evangeline was sentenced to 5 years in a human prison, nothing compared to what she'd tried to condemn me to, but something. I never visited her, never wrote. She'd thrown me away, and I'd survived. That was justice enough. Spring came to the fortress, with green shoots pushing through melting snow, and wolves running through forests that smelled of renewal. Ronan formally declared me his mate in front of the entire pack, a ceremony that involved old words in the wolf language, and the exchange of marks that symbolized belonging. I stood before hundreds of wolves, no longer afraid, no longer invisible. I stood as Celeste Ashford, mate to the Alpha King, valued member of the pack, bridge between two worlds that had spent too long treating each other as enemies. Derek approached me after the ceremony, his expression neutral. I was wrong about you, he said simply. You're stronger than I thought. You've earned your place here. It wasn't quite an apology, but from him, it was close enough. Thank you, I said. And Derek? You were right about one thing. Appearances do matter, which is why I'm glad the pack can see that strength comes in many forms, including humility. He laughed, surprising both of us. You're going to keep me humble, aren't you? Someone has to. He nodded, something like respect in his eyes, and walked away. Not a friend, perhaps, but no longer an enemy. Garrett and his former rogues integrated into pack life, earning their places through hard work and loyalty. They became some of my staunchest defenders, grateful for the second chance I'd helped give them. Sarah became my closest friend, my sister in all the ways that mattered, and Iris, sweet, nervous Iris, grew into her confidence under Sarah's mentorship, eventually becoming a skilled mediator herself. The pack flourished, the treaty held, and I learned what it meant to belong. Not because someone decided I was useful, but because I'd fought for my place and won it through courage and compassion and the stubborn refusal to break. Months turned into years, seasons changed, and through it all, Ronan remained constant, my partner, my love, my home. We balanced each other, his strength and my gentleness, his instinct and my strategy, his wolf and my humanity. Sometimes, late at night, I'd think about the girl I'd been, the one who'd stood in that courtroom while her sister lied, who'd spent a terrified night in Thornhaven expecting to die, who'd been so sure she had nothing to offer a world that kept rejecting her. I wished I could tell her that she was wrong, that her perceived weaknesses would become her greatest strengths, that survival and compassion and the willingness to see value in the broken would transform her into someone powerful, that she would find love in the last place she expected, that she would find home in a fortress of wolves, that she would find herself in the journey from victim to survivor, to something more, something fierce and free and finally whole. But perhaps she'd needed to walk that dark road herself, to find her own strength through trial and pain, and the slow, difficult work of choosing to keep breathing when giving up would have been easier. Perhaps we all did. I stood at the window of our chambers, mine and Ronan's, watching wolves train in the courtyard below. Spring had fully arrived, painting the world in shades of green and gold. Somewhere in those forests, life continued its wild dance. And here, in this fortress, I'd found my place in that dance. Not as prey, not as victim, not as the dispensable daughter or the frightened prisoner or the king's pet, but as Celeste Ashford, mate, bridge builder, survivor, myself. Ronan's arms wrapped around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" "How strange life is," I said softly. "How my sister's worst betrayal led to my greatest salvation, how the place I thought would kill me became the place I finally learned to live. No regrets?" I turned in his arms, looked into those golden eyes that had terrified me once and now felt like home. Not a single one. He kissed me then, gentle and deep and full of promise. And in that kiss, I tasted the future. Challenges to overcome, bridges to build, a pack to help lead, a life lived fully, bravely, without apology. The girl in the prison cell had wanted only to survive. The woman I'd become wanted so much more than that. And with Ronan beside me, with a pack at my back and purpose in my heart, I knew I'd claim every bit of it. This was my story, my triumph. My happily ever after earned through blood and tears and the fierce determination to never, ever give up, and it was only the beginning.